welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 82 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we're discussing chapter 8 of The Clash of Kings, that's Tyrion 2.
And we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We will summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information, some spellings, in case you can't guess the spelling from our talk, and
if you trust
generally
us.
help you if you're not reading along.
If you trust that we're spelling it right.
Yes, that's a good point, actually, yeah. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm good.
This is the if we're recording on a Wednesday, and it's already the third time this week that you and I have been on a video chat.
Yes.
In these
actually,
two rooms.
I don't know if you know this, but I zinged you on that last call.
Oh, you did?
Because the call was recorded, and so when the recording finished, I posted it back to the meeting attendees, and I said, "Here's the recording in case anyone was late."
Oh, I totally forgot about it. I went and had lunch, and then I sat down, and I was like, 20 minutes! I was hoping nobody noticed that I...
I noticed! I said, naming no names, such as Mackelly Ray.
I didn't notice. I didn't notice that either. We're going to have to go back and look.
So yeah, I got you there.
Yes, great. Always
it's
fun.
weird. It's weird to have work calls with you. That's
I know. So Simon and I work in the same department, but we don't work in the same teams. We work on different products. So we just had a couple crossover calls this week. So
well,
anyway.
My most exciting thing is I've put a new shower curtain rod in.
Okay.
It's a curved one to give you a bit more room in the shower.
Yes, I put one of those in the kids' room, kids' bathroom.
Did you do what I did? Because I screwed the two plates into the walls, and then I discovered that I could not get that bar in.
Oh.
You can screw one of the plates into the walls, but then you've got to put the bar on that one, and you got to put the plate on the other end of the bar before you screw it in.
Okay.
Because once they're both in place, there's no way to get the bar in once the two plates are on. So I had to take the plate back off the wall.
Start all over again.
It was a rigmarole. But, given how unhandy I am, it was a very successful job.
Yes, you were fist pumping in the air after it stayed up.
I was.
Well, yeah.
Carson asked, "How strong is it?" I said, "Well, don't be swinging on that thing, but it'll hold the curtain."
It's not going to double as a pull-up bar.
No.
Well, I did finish with my light. You know, the light that I replaced in the laundry room. That I ended up with a 16 by 20 inch hole in my ceiling.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I did manage to finish that, and then the very next day, Molly's shower head broke. So. Now I've had to go out and buy parts to replace, because Stacy doesn't just want to replace the shower head. She wants to replace the shower head, the mixer valve, and the tub spout. So
you can do that?
YouTube's fairly handy for such things. I haven't started yet. We'll find out. I'll let you know next week.
I'll see the family behind you carrying buckets of water.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today, so let's get down to business. How did we leave Tyrion? Given that it's Tyrion 2, not long ago. Last time we saw Tyrion, he'd arrived in King's Landing with his ragtag mountain clans and Bronn. He'd claimed his seat on the small council as Hand of the King to his sister's chagrin. He'd learned that Arya was not in hand and that Joffrey was solely to blame for Ned's death. He was determined to keep Shae's forbidden presence a secret, but Varys was on to him in an instant. Mackelly, why don't we give him the summary?
All right. Tyrion is having a lavish dinner with Janos Slynt, the commander of the City Watch. Slynt is drunk and talkative. As he'll be moving to take up new residence in Harrenhal, he's prepared 6 possible names for his replacement as commander of the City Watch. Tyrion suggests Sir Jacelyn Bywater, who's currently the commander of the Mudgate and a veteran of the subduing of the Greyjoys in the Greyjoy Rebellion. Slynt thinks him too rigid to be a commander.
Tyrion further asks about one of the names on the list, Alar Deem, who recently murdered a whore and her baby. Slynt brushes this trifling matter aside and almost gets lured into who issued that command. Deem is little loved, but he is feared, which Slynt sees as a great asset. Tyrion expresses concern over the difficulty the next man up will have in replacing Slynt as commander. He mentions that Lord Commander Mormont has the same concern at the Wall, and hints that Slynt would be a valuable asset amongst the Night's Watch. Slynt scoffs at the idea as a small chance.
Tyrion points out that life takes unexpected turns. He says that Eddard Stark likely never imagined his life ending on the steps of the Sept of Baelor. Slynt agrees and adds that even Varys didn't know that one was coming. When Tyrion points out that the Queen Regent had agreed that Ned should be pardoned and allowed to take the Black, Slynt retorts that, well, it was the king himself who commanded the beheading. Whether he's 13 or not, that's another debate they get into.
Well, no, I think they both agree he's 13.
Yes, well, that's true.
Things get heated when Slynt admits he gave the command for Sir Ilyn Payne to carry out the beheading, and he'd do it again as Stark tried to buy his loyalty. Tyrion remarks that Slynt had already been sold by then. Slynt lets loose a barrage of insults toward Tyrion, who eventually cuts Slynt off and asks how many sons he has. This stops Slynt dead in his tracks. Eventually he admits to 3 sons and a daughter.
Tyrion does assure him that no harm will come to Slynt's children. But Slynt seems more concerned about his own fate. And when Tyrion tells him he's got immediate passage booked on a ship meant for Eastwatch by the Sea in the Night's Watch, Slynt realizes his life is not in peril and unloads another round of attacks on Tyrion. He points out his personal friendships with King, Queen, and Council. Slynt turns to leave, but before he can escape the small hall, he's met by 7 Gold Cloaks.
The leader is none other than Jacelyn Bywater, the new commander of the Gold Cloaks. Bywater and the men are to escort Slynt directly to the ship. In private, Tyrion gives Bywater Slynt's list of possible successors, and that those men are to accompany Slynt on the voyage. He adds that if Deem were to fall overboard during the journey, that wouldn't be taken amiss.
When the men leave, Lord Varys arrives in the hall. Tyrion exclaims that it was Cersei who sent the Gold Cloaks to the brothel. Tyrion's irked with Varys for not telling him this ahead of time. Varys says it's a hard thing to tell a man about his own sister. Varys tells Tyrion that he did manage to get another of Robert's bastards safely out of the city, but he didn't think the baby would be at risk being so young and the daughter of a prostitute. What threat could she pose, he asks.
During the discussion with Varys, we learn that Shae is unhappy and lonely in her new manse and wants to be closer to Tyrion. He dares not consider that, much to Shae's frustration. The men discuss numbers. With the addition of the Gold Cloaks, Tyrion has a growing force under his command that should be enough to keep Cersei and Joffrey from causing any more trouble.
The pair discuss Varys' riddle that he posed to Tyrion last time regarding the meaning of power, and after much back and forth, Varys eventually says that power is nothing more than a trick. People believe that power is where they choose to believe.
Varys fills Tyrion in on some happenings around the city. A ship's captain plans to leave for Dragonstone the next day and pledge his ships to Stannis. The Redwine twins have bribed a guard and plan to escape on a different ship. Timett has killed a man in a gambling den, and there's been pseudo-traitorous dinner talk at a party recently. Tyrion handles the first 2 and dismisses the latter 2. Finally, he meets with Bronn to learn that Bronn is working hard at recruiting a sellsword army to go with Tyrion's growing force.
Really, it's like 4 conversations, 2 large ones, 2 small conversations. But there's a lot of crossover in the various conversations that makes it confusing at times to remember who said what to whom.
Yeah, I just like anything involving Tyrion and Varys. I always like.
I agree.
They're just thinking about things and scheming and scheming much better than Janos Slynt.
That is for sure. Hands down, much better than Slynt.
But you know what? He did have a very nice meal before his trip to the Night's Watch.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. I hope he got to have some pepper, because we learned from Yoren in Arya's chapter that they don't get pepper on the wall. So I hope he had some pepper with that fancy meal of his.
I would miss that. It wouldn't be the first thing I would miss on the wall, but I would miss that myself. I like pepper.
I noticed that Janos Slynt refers to himself in the third person throughout this chapter. And anytime someone refers to themselves in the third person, it feels like trouble is brewing for them. That's like a signifier that that they are about to face some trouble.
That's an interesting point. Do you have anything to back this up? Or you just
Not really. I'm trying to think if Viserys referred to himself in the third person or not, because he
did call himself the dragon. I mean,
he did. Yes.
Yeah.
See,
you don't want to wake the dragon. I mean, that's clearly
exactly. And also reading this chapter, I realized how many hand injuries there have been. We have Kat's hand injuries where she cut her hand, Jon's hand injury where he burnt his hand. Sir Jacelyn here has completely lost his hand. Other's White lost his hand. Not to mention all the axed hands of the king that have happened.
Right, that's right. We've had that, yeah. And I broke my hand once playing soccer.
See, it's all about the hand.
But I did it with my own butt. Yeah.
I don't know that I know this story.
So I fell over playing soccer, and I fell onto my hand with my butt, with my backside, and I broke 2 bones in my hand.
Oh wow! Okay.
It was I just landed very awkwardly, and so it was my hand was on the floor, and then my sort of hip came down on it, and just. Oh.
I'm surprised.
And it was the middle 2 bones. They're very difficult to break. The middle 2.
Middle 2 fingers, or in the middle of your hand?
Yeah. So your fingers, the bones of your fingers carry on into the bones of your hands, and it was the bones in the hand that correspond to the middle 2 fingers. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm surprised I didn't know that story. I feel like I know most of your soccer stories.
I remember that day saying to the team, "Don't worry, guys. Simon is going to score today." And
when you fell on your hand, did you say, "Simon hurt his hand! Simon hurt his hand!"
Exactly. I've never spoken myself in the third person since.
Well, I thought it was interesting in this chapter to compare Tyrion with his predecessor Ned. Here's some of the comparisons I thought of. Tyrion was buttering Slynt up, making him feel comfortable and proud. Slynt keeps calling Tyrion my lord, and he says, "I'm not a lord as you are. You could just call me Tyrion." So he's pumping him up. He's obviously getting him quite drunk in an attempt to get him to loosen his lips and talk about who sent the Gold Cloaks to kill Barra. Meanwhile,
Ned would not have done it that way. I know where you're headed. Yes. Ned would have
he would
come out and demanded that Janos Slynt tell him who commanded Barra's execution.
Exactly, yes. He would have sat him down, maybe offered him some wine. That's about it.
Maybe, yeah,
and said,
not enough to get him drunk, though.
No. Also, Ned trusted Littlefinger to bribe a man that Ned likely didn't know very well to do a very critical job, which is not what Tyrion did here in this chapter.
Right. Tyrion's doing this himself with heavily armed men around him, out of sight, but right there.
Yes.
At his beck and call.
He's removing someone he knows can't be trusted to put his own man, or maybe Varys's. Tyrion's not quite sure who's Jacelyn Bywater's allegiance is to, but at least it's someone that he handpicked anyway. He's chosen someone who's known for his honor, so that's good, And
yes, and I mean, I think we might touch on this later on, but Tyrion is worried that Jacelyn Bywater might be Varys's man, but being Varys's man means you're not a man of honor. Bywater appears to be a man of honor, and therefore he probably isn't. He isn't Varys's man the same way Janos Slynt was Littlefinger's.
Right.
He's not bought and sold. He may be a friend of Varys and may trust Varys and may confide in Varys, but he's not going to betray people for Varys in the same way that Janos Slynt did.
Doesn't seem like it. Even Slynt mentioned that one of his knocks on Bywater is that he's too honorable. So
right, yeah.
So, that should give Tyrion a sense of security that Ned obviously didn't have.
Yes.
And along those same lines, as Hand of the King, maybe Ned should have examined the Gold Cloaks' power structure a little more to make sure that it was not so easily bought off. Maybe put one of his own guys, possibly put Jory in that position as
Or a man of honor like Jacelyn Bywater.
Exactly, someone like
who
that.
Who he knew, presumably, because Jacelyn Bywater was knighted at Pike.
Yes.
Ned Stark was there too.
Solid point. See?
Mm-hmm.
So...
And where this is heading is Tyrion is making power moves to remove people he sees as not his or threats, and at the same time he's gathering an army around himself. He's got his own people. He's got his own people, but now he controls the Gold Cloaks too.
Yes, which is huge. 6,000 people.
Right. So, imagine if Ned Stark had come into King's Landing and that had been his first move.
Right. Now,
to replace Janos Slynt with Jacelyn Bywater.
Yeah. Now, there's obviously some differences because
Ned's
his friend Robert was king
and was terrible.
Yeah, he probably didn't feel quite as vulnerable. But
nevertheless, this is the Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Even if you're not playing it to win, you play it. You have to play it.
I don't think Ned at that point knew he was playing the Game of Thrones. I think he thought he was just coming to be Robert's Hand of the King.
If he just read ahead, he would have read that you win or you die.
It's true. That's his fault right there. That's his bad. But meanwhile, while Tyrion is gathering this army around him, we've pointed out many times that Ned just kept giving men away. Just 20 men here, 20 men there. And, that certainly didn't help in the end. I'm not sure if he had his full allotment of men around, if it would have mattered in the end, but it certainly wouldn't have hurt.
Yeah, true. Well, it might have hurt them.
Right, yes, that's a good point.
They might be, instead of still troubling Gregor Clegane in the Riverlands, they might be very much dead now.
Yeah, good point. But there's also some similarities that I noticed between them, such as how Tyrion treats Slynt. Rather than have him killed, he takes care of his family, says that his son, Slynt's oldest son, will get land somewhere that he can build a keep on. It won't be Harrenhal, but he will get lands. Yeah, and that the younger two sons will be made squires, and they could possibly become knights. So, that seems like something that Ned would have done. Have him exiled to the Wall, but he's also going to take care of his family. And it certainly doesn't seem like something that Tywin would do.
Oh God, no. Tywin would dispatch. But I think that's the thing. I think Tyrion is a changed man because of his visit at the Wall. I think he sees the need for the Night's Watch, and he genuinely thinks that he should populate that with capable men. Janos Slynt may be a treacherous sellsword, but he's capable. He's commanded a large group of men.
Yeah.
Very competently, although dishonorably,
It's a good point. Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for dishonor in the Night's Watch. I mean, there's not a lot of politicking you can do. You basically fight snarks and grumpkins. That's it.
So far, while there's a strong leadership, the Night's Watch has been around a long time. I'm sure there's been power struggles.
Yeah, but you can't imagine it very often. It leads to sort of internecine murder. Well, probably it does. Probably it does on occasion. People who want to be the Lord Commander squabbling.
Yes, but, right. While there's a capable Lord Commander, you'd imagine that they.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've gotten off topic. This is a Tyrion chapter, not a Jon chapter.
Yeah. So Tyrion has go over the recommendations for who should take over as the Gold Cloaks commander. His recommendation is Alar Deem.
Yes.
It's a clever maneuver by Tyrion to get Slynt to write down his top 6 choices, because basically those are the people who are most loyal to Slynt and therefore the least likely to be trustworthy and therefore to be sent to the Wall too.
Exactly. Yes, it's got multiple benefits here. One, it gives Tyrion, I think he's already got a pretty good sense of who Janos Slynt is, but based on the men that he wrote on this list, he could see, get a better idea firsthand of what kind of man he is. And whoever he writes down, as Alardim was written down, it's likely people that he wants to weed out anyway. Yeah, they're all probably very much in his little clique of guys at the top.
Yeah. And so, as we said, he replaces Slynt with Jacelyn Bywater, who's been captain of the Mudgate, was knighted by Robert Baratheon in the Greyjoy Rebellion. He seems like, Tyrion's obviously given this name by Varys, and that's why Tyrion is worried about this, because he's worried that Jacelyn Bywater could be Varys' man. But that CV, that resume, doesn't sound like someone who's Varys' man. That sounds like someone who's sufficiently honourable that he didn't get any higher than captain of the Mudgate.
Yeah.
He didn't play the game.
Although you wonder if Varys is providing this name, does Varys have something on him?
That's always the danger with honourable men. They can be blackmailed by small dishonours.
Sure. Yeah. We see how hard Ned took it that he had a bastard son.
Right.
And,
yeah.
So
not enough to hide it, of course.
No. Much to Kat's dismay. Yeah. But again, it would have benefited Ned to have done the same here. But of course, like I said earlier, Tyrion had the benefit of watching Ned lose his head first and learn from some of the mistakes, which were many, that Ned made as Hand of the King.
Do you think Tyrion would have walked into King's Landing? Let's say Ned was banished to the Night's Watch or whatever. Do you think Tyrion would have behaved any differently? No, not even that. What if Ned had just stepped down as Hand of the King when Robert died and gone back to Winterfell? Tyrion would still have done all this, because that's how Tyrion is. Tyrion knows that you need to aggregate power around yourself in a situation like this,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it might not have been quite as pressing because...
Yes, good point.
We've, since Ned's stint as Hand of the King, we've seen the Gold Cloaks, be bought, and Ned be beheaded, even though he was not supposed to be beheaded. So,
but you see, this is why, in many ways, Tyrion's being more honourable, because he's not going to have to buy the Gold Cloaks anymore. He's made sure that the Gold Cloaks are headed by someone that he trusts and believes in, and someone he thinks cannot be bought.
You're right.
So now he doesn't have to worry about them anymore.
Yeah, that's a solid point. And Ned was told that Jon Arryn was murdered, obviously, so it might have been prudent for him to remove the commander in charge at the time. Not that it's necessarily Slynt's fault or anything, but at the same time, the Hand of the King was murdered under his watch. So regardless, it might have been an opportunity to put his man in place.
Yeah. So this kind of takes me to thinking about Varys' motivations again. If Bywater is as rigid and honest as he appears to be, could he be bought and sold? Or, like you said, could he be under Varys' thumb for another reason? And if so, is Varys the sort of person to do that? I mean, I think Varys is the sort of person to manipulate other people's weaknesses, but what's his ultimate motivation? I mean, whenever pressed on this, he says that his loyalty is to the realm.
Yes, and
so if his loyalty is to the realm, he wouldn't sell out. He wouldn't use the Gold Cloaks to overthrow the Hand of the King.
Right. And right now, it's very muddy what Varys is up to, what his allegiances are, because he seems to try and help people, but at the same time, doesn't always give them the exact information they need at the time.
Yeah.
So, but he certainly claims it a lot that his loyalty is to the realm, and so far it seems like he's got no particular loyalty to any one person.
Yeah, and I think this is in the notes later on, so I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but I think, to me, it's clear if you take Varys' actions on their face value, that he has done nothing to suggest he isn't loyal to the realm as a whole, with one exception, and that is the conversation that Arya overheard between him and Ilio Mopatis,
yes,
where he was clearly planning to overthrow the Iron Throne and replace it with a Targaryen.
Yep.
Viserys or Daenerys.
That perspective puts everything that he does in a different light, because otherwise, you're right, it looks like he's just trying to be helpful.
Right.
But we know...
And people don't like him simply because he is knowledgeable and slimy and, and a spy. People just don't like him. But he does nothing to break their trust. The one thing he does routinely do is he withholds his information. He drips his information out. He gathers it, and then he gives the information out in bits and pieces to the people he think need it.
Yes.
So he has that sort of power motivation, but he's working for the realm, it seems. But not at very much personal risk, because when things turn on the people who are his allies, he betrays them. He walks away. He's not going to go down with Ned Stark just because Ned Stark was honorable.
And he makes a reference to that later on in this chapter when Tyrion says he ought to have him thrown into the sea, just like he suggested Al-Ardim be thrown into the sea. And but we'll get to that in a little bit here. But then when Tyrion finally drops the bomb to Slynt, and he asks Slynt about his kids, how many kids you have, and he says, I've got 3 sons and a daughter. And Tyrion says to him, on my word, no harm will come to them. And like I said earlier, the oldest son will get land somewhere, not Harrenhal, and will inherit the title Lord that Janos has inherited. So that's good. Now, so his 3 sons are Moros, which is the oldest, and he's the one that's going to inherit the title and some lands. We saw him not that long ago. He rode in Joff's name day tourney, and Sansa had wished him dead because of the role his father Janos played in Ned's beheading. And she almost got that wish, because he rode against Balon Swan and was not only knocked off his horse, but he was knocked off his horse and then dragged by, I guess, a foot or something that was still stuck to his saddle across the Bailey. So, and Tyrion mentions that his oldest, Moros, will be responsible for finding a marriage for the daughter. And then we've got Jothos and Danos. They're the younger sons, and Tyrion said he will find them a squiring gig, and maybe someday they can become knights.
There you go. Better than nothing. Better than what awaits Janos himself.
Yes.
So, Bywater and 6 other Gold Cloaks stop Slynt from leaving. He's to be escorted directly to the ship, which is called the Summer Dream. The 6 names on Slynt's list are to join him. And Tyrion, again, like you said, it shows some heart to not have these people killed like his father probably would. Well, his father wouldn't have these people killed. His father's more likely to have Jacelyn Bywater killed for being too honourable, to be honest. But sending them to the wall is good for everyone. But he still shows a bit of ruthlessness when he says that he has no problem if Al-Ardim, the one who killed Barra and her mother, got pushed overboard en route.
Yep. And remember, at the end of the chapter when he was sent here by Tywin to rule, he told Shay, I'm going to do the last thing that they would expect. I'm going to show justice, or I'm going to enforce justice or whatever. And that's certainly showing some sense of justice there. A man that kills a child in cold blood without question, they don't get to be exiled. They're pushed over the side of his ship and drowned.
Although, again, you could argue the Night's Watch could use him, Brutality is not necessarily a bad trait in a member of the Night's Watch.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure if he had gotten a raven to Mormont first and said, how do you want me to handle him? He would have said, we'll take him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Tyrion's irked at Varys. So sort of Slynt exits at this point. And again, just the biggest difference between Ned and Tyrion is there, because Slynt leaves the room in a bluster, saying he's going to use his friends at court will not stand for what Tyrion is planning. But Tyrion never gives him a chance to talk to them. Right. He's escorted directly from this conversation to the ship, which will take him to the Night's Watch. There's no way this can backfire.
If it had been Ned, he would have said, okay, now, the ship is down here at this dock. I expect you to march yourself down there. You better be on that ship. Yeah. But this is where...
that's how you're successful, you see. It's the details. To be successful, you've got to focus on those details.
But this is where Tyrion says that he's irked with Varys, and he says he's I think we've mentioned this already. He's irked with Varys because Varys didn't tell him that it was Cersei that sent the men to kill Barra.
But I have some. Maybe this belongs in pedantry. Actually, I don't think I have any pedantry this week. But this actually, to be a little bit pedantic, he is turning on Varys and saying, "Why didn't you tell me it was Cersei?" But when he questioned Janos Slynt didn't say it was Cersei.
I have that listed down here. How did Tyrion? Where did he get that from?
Well, where he got it from is logic. The only person who would want a prostitute's daughter who happened to look like Robert Baratheon killed, the baby, not the prostitute, killed, is Cersei Lannister.
Yes,
nobody else would care.
In a few minutes, I want to talk about. I want to consider whether there are any alternatives to that.
Well, Tyrion came to that conclusion anyway.
Yes, exactly.
So what's the point Varys telling him? If he can come to that conclusion himself, Varys is off the hook as far as I'm concerned.
If it's obvious, you don't have to tell him.
Exactly.
But Tyrion tells Varys he should have him thrown into the sea as well for not telling him about this. And Varys' line is something like, "Storms come and go, waves crash overhead, the big fish eat the little fish, but I keep on paddling." And like we were talking earlier, when he doesn't do a lot of things at his own peril. When things aren't going the way or starting to trend in a certain direction, he either goes with that if it looks like it's going to be successful, or he zigs and zags depending on which is best for his life. And so I thought it was maybe more appropriate to call him the cockroach than the spider.
Yes.
Because we have seen kings and power players come and go, wars start and end, but yet Varys continues to survive. So
I think, coming back to why Tyrion thinks Slynt was ordered to kill Barra by Cersei, I think it's the fact that Slynt almost lets it out and then clamps down on it. And if he's clamping down on it, then it must be someone powerful enough to make him not want to share that news.
Okay, yeah. It was something... I've read this chapter several times this week, and I could not find any specific instance that was like, aha, here's where he figured that out. So it could be in there. Maybe I just missed it.
But that is what happens, right? I mean, Slynt is talking about it, and then he sort of like, he catches himself and he says, "Oh, you think I'm drunk and I'll spill the beans on this kind of thing." But
you used I. He says Janos Slynt, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, so I, who is not Janos Slynt, used I, but Janos Slynt, who is Janos Slynt, used Janos Slynt. There you go. So yeah, I think that's the only possible clue, is the fact that if it was anybody else, why wouldn't Jacelyn Bywater share that news? And yeah, okay, I'm dying to know who your alternative candidates are for the murder of Barra.
The best I could come up with for why Tyrion came to that conclusion is that we've heard about the rumor of the twins that Robert fostered at Casterly Rock that Cersei had killed. There's a rumor about that.
Right.
Tyrion knows how cruel his sister is, and knows that the current king and his younger siblings are a product of incest and therefore not actually Robert Baratheon's children.
Right.
So putting all that together, he might have realized, oh, she was taking out someone who actually is Robert Baratheon's kid, and this is not the first time she's killed babies of Robert's.
Oh, so you mean the revelation came because it dawned on him who Barra was?
Yes. He knew who Barra was, didn't he?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. So what's revelatory about this conversation then? If he knew who Barra was...
Only that he put the dots together, that she's killed babies of Robert's before, and he knows she's capable of it, therefore, and knows that that her kids aren't actually Robert's kids, and therefore don't actually have any claim to the throne whatsoever. So she was just taking care of those who could have any kind of claim.
So Tyrion and Varys seem surprised by Cersei's brutality, and insecurity. But as you've just said, Tyrion should be aware of her brutality if the rumours are true about her killing those twins.
Yep, just rumors as far as we know.
Yep. Her insecurity, I mean, honestly, it feels overblown. I mean, sure, they do technically have a greater claim to the throne than Joffrey Baratheon, but possession is 9/10 of the law, and these are bastard sons of prostitutes, you know? I mean, these are not going to be... They're never going to have people rallying around them. It just seems incredibly insecure to have to want them killed.
Yeah.
Tyrion accuses Varys of having a lapse in his sort of intelligence network, that he allowed Barra's death. But Varys says, well, that one happened first, and as soon as I got wind of it, I got the other one, Gendry, out of King's Landing quick as I could.
Yeah. Yeah, so we had guessed that before, that it was Varys that got Gendry out of town, and I guess now he's just confirmed it for us. So let's just pause for a second and consider whether there are any other possible options besides Cersei having...
There aren't, but knock yourself out.
Okay. Now, we know the Gold Cloak captain who wanted Gendry said they were there on the Queen's business. And we know the Queen knew about Barra.
You're really reinforcing my position so far.
I am. I'm laying out the... we know Cersei knew about Barra because she was in the room when Ned told Robert, I was visiting a brothel to meet your daughter. She looks just like you, just like the one in the Vale. So
oh god, he's just writing death sentences all over the place. That Ned Stark.
I'm drawing a blank on her name. It's Maya. It looks just like Maya Stone in the Vale. So, yeah. Now we need to worry about her as well. Obviously, she knows that Joffrey is not Robert's. And so that's all pretty incriminating evidence. I agree. But we also know that not all is as it seems in the small council, and that most of the small council have their own agendas. So, does anyone else have any motive? Well, let's take a look at our little finger, shall we? Now, could he possibly have sent men out on the Queen's behalf without her knowing? We do know that he loves to stir chaos. Tyrion did say that Slynt was Littlefinger's man, and Slynt names Littlefinger as a friend to Tyrion. When he's threatening him, you know, he mentions that he's friends with Littlefinger as well as everyone else in the small council, basically. We know that it was Littlefinger that provided the bribe and negotiated the rise to the small council in Harrenhal. So there's definitely a link there. And he also does Slynt does things without question, which is another claim he makes as a positive, that he doesn't ask questions.
Right, yeah.
And then, so, we're getting pretty close to...
I finally figured out where you're going with this. Good God.
We're getting pretty close to where, if something were to happen to Joffrey and Tommen, and possibly even Marcella, Stannis and Renly end up killing each other. You remove the bastard children, and you've got a wide open throne.
Yeah, but okay, all right. So let me counter that one. Now I see where you're going. So Littlefinger could hope to ascend to the throne. When you said he likes chaos, yes, he does like chaos. One of the reasons he likes chaos is because it gives him a route to the throne. I'm with you. I think the presence of these bastards adds to the chaos. Keeping them alive just stirs the pot. Killing them doesn't help.
Although it has had the effect of making Tyrion more suspicious of Cersei. Not that he could be much more suspicious of Cersei, but...
Yeah. And also has made Tyrion cement his power more.
True.
So, it's backfiring so far, Littlefinger, just FYI, you know. But yeah, I mean, I'm just not buying it because I do take your point that he does like chaos, but as an agent of chaos, he would want to keep them alive. In fact, if anything, what I would do is I would get a tattoo on Gendry's forearm that says, "My father is Robert Baratheon." That's what I would do. Yes. And then send him north and say, show that to everyone.
Start parading this kid around at small council meetings.
No, definitely get him out of King's Landing, because you're not safe, you know.
So Varys does back up the claim that Tyrion he makes that it's Cersei that's been doing this, but he does say it, but he doesn't specifically say it. He says your own sweet sister. It's a hard thing to tell a man. He could be misleading Tyrion about who sent the Gold Cloaks.
He may not know, and he may be covering for that.
Yeah. And we know that he has allowed people to believe things that were wrong, that he likely knew that were wrong in the past. Like, he likely knew who owned that dagger that Cat brought to King's Landing, but he let Cat think that the owner of the dagger was Tyrion, when he probably could have corrected her because he was in the room when Littlefinger told her, "Oh, that was my dagger, and I lost it in a bet to Tyrion." So, that's... I'm with you. It is likely Cersei. I'm just saying, but it's not beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Are you saying it could be Varys at this point? Because Varys got Gendry out, it seems. I mean, is he just... I mean, this is like Munchausen's. He kills one child so he can rescue the other one from the evil person who's killing children.
I hadn't thought about it being Varys. I was just thinking about it being Varys not letting Tyrion think what he wanted to think. He guessed it was Cersei. But you're right. He did manage to get Janos Slynt out and put Bywater in, who may or may not be his man, by this whole killing Barra thing. So... Yeah. But
anyone else? Any other of your feeble candidates for this?
Yeah, this one's even more feeble. What about Joff? Maybe he's heard rumors of bastard siblings and wanted to clear them out of town.
Okay. Straight off the bat, I'll give more credence to this than anyone else on the small council. Because, he might hear about it and he really might want them gone. He is his mother's son. And his mother's nephew as well.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's basically all I've got about Joff. But, I would just say in my defense of Cersei argument, again, she has been accused of murder before, the murder of Jon Arryn, and we have some serious doubts about the legitimacy of that claim at this point.
Because the claimant keeps claiming whoever the person standing in front of her is the murderer of Jon Arryn.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, okay.
And then, okay. I got another thing that might be a little bit out of left field here. So Varys says that baby Barra was a base-born girl of a prostitute with a prostitute for a mother. What threat could she pose? And I was...
Yeah, I know what you're asking. You're asking, is he poking Tyrion to find out if Tyrion knows of the rumours of Joffrey's parentage?
That's exactly where I'm going. Yes.
Yeah, because obviously, if Joffrey's trueborn, then that child poses no threat whatsoever.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that is what he's doing at this case, I think.
Yes.
But I mean, what could she threaten anyway?
Yeah, not likely anything, just because she might look like a king who, by the time she's old enough for people to be like, wow, you look like Robert Baratheon. They'll have forgotten what Robert Baratheon looked like.
Exactly.
But yes, I was thinking he might be trying to gauge Tyrion's response to see if he could pick up on whether Tyrion might tip his hand as to knowing whether that Joffrey and his siblings aren't Robert's. But then Varys, he mentions that Barra's mother was so in love with Robert, and he's saying all the right things that Tyrion wants to hear about this situation with the prostitute. And Slynt earlier was saying all the wrong things. He referred to the whole situation as even a whore and her whelp. And of course, when Tyrion thinks of this prostitute, he only envisions Shay and his wife Tysha.
Yeah. So yes, he will always have a soft spot for the prostitutes and
right.
People who are mean to them. He will not like.
Yeah, and I was wondering if that was intentional. Varys doesn't often say things just to say things, so I wondered if he was trying to get more on Tyrion's good side by, mentioning that this prostitute was in love with Robert.
I think Varys is just a sympathetic, humanist. I mean, he just sees the best in people.
Yes, that's what it is.
doesn't think of her profession. He thinks of her as the sweet young girl she was, who happened to be in love with the king.
Maybe.
I'm with Varys. The interesting point that Joffrey gave the command to execute Ned, and that Slynt and Ilyn Payne carried it out without any hesitation, almost as if they expected it.
Yeah. And now that's a conversation between the two of them. They're going back and forth. And it's actually Tyrion that says almost like they expected it.
Yeah.
But...
And Varys says that, he was taken by surprise by it, but it did seem that Slynt and Payne weren't. But the flip side of that is, of course, that they're servants and they do what they're told, and they're used to doing things without question.
Yeah.
So
true.
They would jump to it. But it is,
especially if the king,
right, especially King Joffrey. My God, I would jump to it too. He's a nutcase.
But
I did wonder if Tyrion might have gone further with that line of questioning to see if there was some expectation that this was going to happen.
Yes. It made me wonder if there was a different voice in Joff's ear aside from Cersei and Varys. Cersei and Varys.
Well, actually, I was going to say I'm struggling to think of who that could be, but again, Chaos Monkey Littlefinger.
Yep. Yes. For me, my finger always points first to Littlefinger. Yeah. And we know he loves to start trouble between the Starks and the Lannisters. And this is the granddaddy of all the trouble between the two of them right there.
And removes his love rival too.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. And one other thing about this is when they're having the discussion about the riddle, the power riddle, Varys says, who truly killed Stark? Was it Joff who gave the command? Sir Ilyn who swung the sword? Or was it another? And I was thinking, another? Why would he say that? Who was the other? Who could the another be? So,
but I feel like Varys doesn't know. If Varys knew, then he would have taken steps against it.
He might not have known at the time, but he might have since figured it out.
Yeah, that's true. So Tyrion takes stock of the growing forces around him and how he's securing them. Ned should have done the same thing. I think Ned was lulled by being Lord of Winterfell, where his authority was absolute. And people jumped to his beck and call.
I absolutely agree.
And where King's Landing was a different thing altogether, and he had to make sure he had backing for his commands, not just give them.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that someone who's so experienced in being a leader and being a lord has had such a rough time of it, where a newbie, Tyrion, seems to be doing the right thing so far.
Right, but then, exactly. Tyrion has always had to fight for his authority. He was always... he's the youngest of three and the least popular of all.
Right.
And he's had to fight for everything he's ever done. Whereas Ned, he wasn't the eldest brother to begin with, but, he's been Lord for a while and he's grown, he's got expectation. And especially because the North is just much more regimented,
Yes, much more direct, it seems. Yeah, he inherited his lordship and he treated his men well to ensure that they stayed loyal, which is different than coming into a foreign place and having to establish rule.
Right. And especially one where there are different power forces. There are no powerful forces in Winterfell other than the Starks. You could alienate some liege lords, but probably you wouldn't. They're going to be loyal to the Starks,
Yeah.
Unless you were like King Aerys, they're going to stay loyal to you.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I agree.
And when people do rebel, like the Greyjoys, you join forces with all the nobles and you go and crush them,
Yeah, then go back to being Lord of Winterfell.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's a long discussion in this, toward the end of this chapter, about the power riddle, and they go back and forth about, we've kind of talked a lot about it last
when it was first posed.
Yeah. I don't think that was last Tyrion chapter, was it? Oh, maybe it was. It was the last Tyrion chapter. Yeah. But basically, they decide that power is where people believe power is. And Varys says that, power is no more than a shadow on a wall, but a small man can cast a large shadow. And that made me think of, at the very end of the very first Jon chapter of A Game of Thrones, Tyrion opened a door and the light cast a shadow. He cast a shadow from the light, and it said Tyrion Lannister stood as tall as a king. And again, I think he's playing toward Tyrion's insecurities about his size and looks, and just trying to maybe butter him up subconsciously a little bit there.
Yeah, I think Tyrion's pretty proof against that, though. I think Tyrion knows what he looks like.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely aware of it, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Him saying all the right things and Slynt saying all the wrong things definitely didn't hurt.
Yeah. So Varys is an impressive collection of intel of things going on in King's Landing, the ship that's about to defect to Stannis, the Red Wine Boys planning to escape. So Tyrion puts the kibosh on both of those without too much fuss, of course. Tyrion keeps probing Varys as to his loyalties. Varys ever insists that he cares only for the realm. So we'll just have to take him at his word for now. One interesting point that they make here is that Varys mentions a spike in religious fervour caused by the comet. I always find the religious backdrop to the story very interesting. So that was a point we'll keep an eye on, see if that bubbles up some more.
Definitely. And I was a little bit surprised. I mean, there's not a whole lot that Tyrion could do other than have them rounded up and kicked out of the city, but Varys mentions that they foretell doom, destruction, and are spreading fear to all who will listen. And it seems like there's already pretty low morale in the city right now, and it would feel like that would be making it even lower. So maybe want to consider
it feels
making
like
them stop.
Yes, it feels like it wouldn't take too much to convince such a person to change their story a little bit if the alternative is being thrown out of the city into the war.
Maybe, yes, in the middle of a war, exactly.
So Tyrion's setting himself up nicely. He's got Shay and a manse, and he's hired the best cook in King's Landing, and Bronn is hiring more sellswords. They have a funny conversation where Bronn says, Tyrion asks him how he recruits the sellswords. He says, "Oh, I make them fight me." And he said, "Well, what if one of them kills you?" He said, "That's the one you should hire."
Yeah. And he asks him, "Have you killed any of the men?" And he said, "None that you'd want to hire."
I like Bronn. He's a good one.
Yeah, so it's definitely apparent that Tyrion's getting a great deal of manpower around him, but how well can he trust these men not to sell him out, especially the sellsword army that he's gathering? And we know that the Mountain Clan army still think he's the captive.
Right.
They think he's their captive. I wonder if that's still going on there. I would hope by now they've figured it out.
All right. Background?
So I thought since we were saying goodbye to one captain of the City Watch and hello to a new captain, I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the past captains of the City Watch. So Prince Damon Targaryen commanded the City Watch for a year in 104 to 105 AC. It was actually Damon who instituted their standard equipment, including that signature gold cloak that they wear. He also supplied them with a dirk, short sword, and a cudgel. And at that time, when Prince Damon was the commander, they were about 2,000 men in the watch. And years later, during the Dance of the Dragons, the officers in the City Watch were loyal to Queen Alicent Hightower and the Greens. However, the rank-and-file Gold Cloaks supported their former commander, Damon, who, as husband and uncle to Rhaenyra Targaryen, was a leader of the Blacks. Sir Luther Largent was appointed commander at the start of the war, the Dance of the Dragons, that is, but Sir Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, named his son Gawain as Luther's second in command. During the fall of King's Landing, Luther led a coup in support of the Blacks and personally killed Gawain Hightower. Luther was killed during the riots in King's Landing, though, and Sir Balon Birch became the new commander. And here's where things get a little bit crazy. So there was a garrison of the Gold Cloaks known as the Mudfoot, as they were the garrison that was stationed at the River Gate, or otherwise known as the Mud Gate, and they joined a hedge knight named Perkin the Flea. Okay, so Sir Perkin had declared his squire, Trystane as king. He became Trystane Truefire. And this Mudfoot garrison flew Trystane Truefire's banner above the river gate. And there's a whole lot more to this story about Perkin and Trystane that we'll tell another time because we just don't have the time for it right now. But ultimately, Sir Perkin did eventually become commander of the City Watch for a time.
Wow. After naming his squire king.
Yes.
Fascinating.
There's a whole lot to how he got from there to being named commander of the City Watch, but we don't have time for it. So,
all right. Comparison with the television show. In an earlier scene, we see the Gold Cloaks murdering various Robert's bastards. There are more than just Barra and Gendry in the TV show. So we see them murdering a lot of people, including Barra. Then we get a nasty scene with Littlefinger threatening a prostitute for being too upset to work, over Barra.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And in the show, the mother did not die. She survived. The baby was killed, but the mother survived. In the book, both mother and child were killed.
Right. The mother died trying to protect her baby.
Yeah. The dinner scene with Janos Slynt is very similar. They are waited on very poorly by Podrick, Tyrion's new squire. There is no list of replacements. There's no sense that Slynt was leaving King's Landing for Harrenhal. But the trap is very similar. There's no chat with Varys afterwards. Show Tyrion doesn't bring up the question of what will become of Slynt's children. They're never mentioned. And Tyrion names Bronn commander of the City Watch.
Wow, that is very different than the story we have going on here in this book.
Yeah.
Cool.
So pedantry, only how did Tyrion suddenly come to the conclusion that it was his sister without immediately thinking it was his sister? That's the thing. That's the tricky part. Either you immediately think it's Cersei or you never think it's Cersei.
Right.
I'm not sure what piece of evidence came up to tip him over that way.
If any of you listening know something, see something, or read something that we've missed, let us know, because I went through this chapter multiple times and could not, with that intent to try and figure out where he got that idea from, I couldn't find it.
News and notes. What have you got?
Well, we got an email from a listener named Jenny, who we've communicated with in the past, and she really liked our Dr. Honda chat.
I did too.
Yes, as did I. She was surprised about the separate diagnosis between children and adults concerning psychopathy, which I think you and I both were in that camp as well. And she did say she enjoyed the opportunity to give Joffrey new consideration, wondering if he should be viewed somewhat more sympathetically because of his upbringing. But then she said, after introspection, she realized she just couldn't bring herself to see him any differently. She said, he's just so darn unlikable and unsympathetic. But she was also stunned to hear that it is possible that he could have straightened himself out by adulthood.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't waste too much of my life trying to give him a second chance, to be honest. Because he's horrible. But yeah, he's a victim of circumstance, no doubt.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But, one thing that I had said back to her, my response was how fascinating it would have been to have a Joffrey POV in that Arya chapter where Ned was beheaded to get his point of view as he's, calling out for Ned's head. Well, what exactly was going through his mind, if anything?
I tell you what, when we're done with this podcast, let's start a new one, which is we start from the beginning again, but we do POV chapters for other characters.
Yes, that's a fantastic idea.
We just make it up on the... we read the chapter and then POV it from another character's point of view, giving them whatever motivations and thoughts we want.
Yeah, the actions still stay the same.
The action stays the same, yeah.
It's just we put our... Oh my goodness, you're on. You found gold. You've uncovered a golden idea right here. That could be our Patreon. So thank you, Jenny. I appreciated your email. I appreciated our discussion about it. Now we've got our review, and I chose this one because it made me laugh. And you could go ahead and read it because I've already read it, and so I'll just sit back and watch you read it.
So this is from Neplasultra123 on Apple Podcasts, and the review is titled, Honestly, Yeah. I really hate to do this. Oh, no. But I have to give this a 5-star rating. Okay. No need to hate. I expected this to be a complete disaster with a Brit and an American joining forces. I purchased some popcorn, sat back and said to myself, what could go right? Were you there in the room when we started this? To my complete surprise, and more than a small measure of disappointment, I found the podcast to be considerably more than palatable. There is clear alchemy, not chemistry, as I'm almost certain there is some witchery or dark art at work to make the combo function as well as it does. The hosts are informative, funny, insightful, and seem to be generally nice guys. But again, witchery or some other dark art, for sure. My one criticism that I'm pretty much through the episodes, even after listening to a couple of them twice. Keep up the good work or just completely muck it up. I have plenty of popcorn and I'm flexible. I love it.
You see why I chose this one.
That's really good.
That was really good.
That. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that review. It's fantastic. Made me laugh. More than once it made me laugh.
Keep them coming. So let's conclude. So one thing I will say, actually, this is one of the first times that Tyrion's machinations have actually worked. He has previously wriggled out of a few jams with his cunning, but this is a sort of like a proactive one, and it's actually sort of come to fruition. So bravo, Tyrion.
Yep.
So yeah, as I said before, it reminds me of a Ned maneuver, but the difference was when Slynt left the room plotting his response, he was met with overwhelming force and dragged off to the ship. Ned would have given him 24 hours and on his own recognizance to come to the ship.
I'm giving you 1 day to pack.
1 day to talk to whoever you want and gather as many people as you want.
I'm not going to keep an eye on you or have any of my men watch you because I've given them all away.
And here's 6,000 gold pieces to keep in your pocket until then.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's very distinct contrasts and similarities between Ned and Tyrion in their common job here. One is selfless, giving away men, and very direct. The other is a little more sly and cunning, but he's also acquiring a large force. But they both care for the innocent and punish the cruel. So
right, exactly. And that's why Ned is flawed, you see. Ned should think about that. He's no longer in a position to protect the innocent and punish the cruel. Tyrion is.
Yeah, very solid point.
Tyrion's trying to do justice, as he said. He's clearing house as promised. Maybe it's not going to be easy as he thought, particularly when a lot of people committing the injustices are his own family, and when the people he's elevating might be just as corrupt or corruptible as the people he's getting rid of.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. He even thinks about it during this chapter that it frustrates him that he's punishing the likes of Janos Slynt and Allard Dean when he knows that it was almost certainly he's all of a sudden sure that it was Cersei that put them up to this in the first place, and that there's a lot of other people that probably should be brought to have some sort of punishment or justice, but he can't do that right now. So.
Yeah. And once again, look, it was Cersei. Stop debating.
But could it be?
It could be anyone.
Could it be someone else?
It could be anyone, but she's got previous and she's got motive.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely, on the surface, seems like it's Cersei. I'm just saying, you never know. We thought for sure Cersei murdered Jon Arryn when we first heard Lysa's story. Then we started to dig a little deeper and realized, oh, she's crazy.
Yeah. So, and Varys, we still don't know about Varys. I mean, he's obviously, he's got layers like an onion.
Yeah, he's certainly, he's unlikely reading like an open book.
Right, true.
Yeah. He's certainly giving people what he wants to give them. And,
yeah, and his oft quoted loyalty to the realm is clear. All of his actions back it up, with the one exception of that conversation with Illyrio Mopatis that Arya overheard.
Yep.
Now, but you could even argue that does too, because if he thinks the best thing for the realm was Viserys Targaryen on the throne, then he was still working for the realm. I would argue that would have been a terrible piece of judgment, but
you're right. Nothing that he said to Illyrio was like, oh, well, that goes against the best interest of the realm. If he thinks that anyone in the Baratheon line is the wrong person for the realm's best interests, then he's doing what he needs to do to protect the realm.
Or maybe, I mean, that was prior to Robert's death, so maybe it was just the thought of Cersei's children having the power. That's what he was plotting against, not Robert per se. He was happy for Robert to, bungle his kingship. But he knew that Joffrey would be far, far worse for the realm.
Yeah, could have been that as well.
Okay, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Discord.
That's right. Come join the conversation on Discord. And if you like what we're doing, please consider going out and leaving us a 5-star rate and or fantastic review, much like the one we read on the air today. And guess what? If you do that, we might read yours on the air as well.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.